Metaurus puts it plainly, in a monologue that doubles as a confession. Humans are born prey, fragile, afraid. The Imperium selects a chosen few, children we break over decades of conditioning, purging them of weakness, carving out their fear. He pauses. A child who had never known fear. What could a soul like that be capable of? That question haunts every Astartes who has lived long enough to ask it, because the official line, carved into 10,000 years of Imperial doctrine, says this question shouldn't exist at all. The Emperor himself declared it settled, in words widely attributed to him. They shall be my finest warriors, these men who give of themselves to me. Like clay I shall mold them, and in the furnace of war forge them. They will be of iron will and steely muscle. They are my bulwark against the terror. They are the defenders of humanity. They are my space marines, and they shall know no fear. 6 words. They shall know no fear. A tabletop special rule, a faction slogan, a recruitment poster for the most dangerous military force humanity has ever produced. And like most propaganda, it works precisely because it leaves out everything that matters. The phrase operates on several levels simultaneously. In Imperial culture, it's myth-making, a statement designed to make baseline humans believe the Emperor's angels of death are emotionally invulnerable. And in the narrative fiction of Black Library novels, it becomes something far more complicated. A doctrinal ideal that Astartes are trained to embody but never fully achieve. Hypno-indoctrination, the Imperial psycho-encoding process that rapidly instills knowledge, loyalty, and behavioral patterns into an Astartes recruit's psyche, doesn't delete fear from the brain. It buries it, reroutes it, compresses the primal, animal terror of personal death into something a transhuman nervous system can override through discipline, faith, and chemical mediation. A Space Marine's secondary heart, his Laramin's organ that clots wounds in seconds. His catalepsian node that lets him sleep with half his brain while the other half stays combat ready. 19 gene seed implants reshape his body into something that barely registers pain. His hypno-conditioning reshapes his mind into something that barely registers panic. But suppressed and gone aren't the same thing. The fear of a bolter round through the chest? Manageable. The fear of an orc charge? Irritating. The fear of death itself? Largely irrelevant to a warrior who considers dying in the Emperor's service the highest possible honor. What remains, what the conditioning can't reach, is dread, shame, spiritual horror. The creeping suspicion that something inside you is wrong. The knowledge that the universe contains things that shouldn't be possible, and that fighting them might cost you something worse than your life. That is what Space Marines actually fear. The warp is where it starts. Every Astartes knows the warp exists. Their ships travel through it. Their astropaths communicate across it. Their librarians draw power from it. But knowing the warp exists and encountering what lives inside it are fundamentally different experiences, and the gap between them has broken Marines who survived every conventional battlefield the galaxy could offer. In James Swallow's Fear to Tread, the Blood Angels are lured to the plains of Cygnus Prime, where they must face not just warp-spawned armies of chaos, but, in the novel's own language, their own personal demons. That phrasing is deliberate. The threat on Cygnus Prime isn't purely military. Demons don't simply kill you. They unravel the rules of reality in front of your eyes. Physics breaks. Geometry lies. Dead brothers speak with voices that aren't their own. The Imperium's official stance throughout the Great Crusade was that demons didn't exist. The Emperor's own imperial truth insisted on a materialist universe. When Astartes first encountered beings that violated everything they'd been taught about how reality works, the existential shock was as dangerous as the creatures themselves. The setting's own tagline frames the scope. There is no peace amongst the stars, only an eternity of carnage and slaughter, and the laughter of thirsting gods. Thirsting gods, not mindless aliens, not rival empires, Sentient, cosmic malignancies that watch, laugh, and offer gifts indistinguishable from curses. And unlike every Xenos threat in the galaxy, orcs, Tyranids, Eldari, Necrons, demons can't be permanently destroyed by bolter fire. They reform, they return, they remember your name. For a warrior built to solve problems through superior force, an enemy that superior force can't permanently destroy is a nightmare without exit. This is why every Space Marine chapter maintains chaplains, warrior priests whose primary duty isn't tactical command, but spiritual surveillance. A chaplain watches over every action of a battle brother from initiation to last breath, monitoring for signs of slackening zeal or wavering belief. Chaplains serve as the spiritual leaders of a chapter and are responsible for maintaining the faith and morale of their battle brothers. That language treats spiritual corruption like incoming ordnance, something that must be deflected constantly because it's always, constantly hitting. Chaplain armor is jet black. Their helmets are skull-shaped death masks designed to remind every Astartes who sees them of mortality's impermanence and the necessity of preserving the immortal soul. Chaplains of the Blood Angels are specifically tasked with detecting the early signs of the Black Rage. Dark Angels interrogator chaplains hunt the fallen, former brothers who turned traitor 10,000 years ago, and force them to repent before executing them. In every chapter, the chaplain's job, stripped to its core, is to stand between a Space Marine and the worst thing that could happen to him. That worst thing isn't death on the battlefield. It's becoming what you were made to destroy. Chaos Space Marines, Traitor Marines, Heretic Astartes were once loyalists. Every single one. The 9 traitor legions that followed War Master Horus into rebellion more than 10,000 years ago were, until the moment of betrayal, brothers to the legions that remained loyal. Same armor, same gene seed, same oaths. And then those oaths stopped meaning anything at all. The transformation doesn't happen overnight. Lore describes it as incremental, impulses that serve the chaos gods creeping into decision-making, small compromises that widen into chasms, a slow spiritual rot that hollows out purpose until the Marine looks up and realizes he has become unrecognizable. The flesh and power armor of Chaos Space Marines warp and twist into inhuman forms under the influence of accumulated warp energies. Mutations bloom, faces distort. The most favored become demon princes, immortal, godlike, and utterly inhuman. Those who fail mutate into chaos spawn, mewling, shapeless abominations, neither alive nor dead nor capable of understanding what they once were. Loyalist Astartes know this end exists. They've seen it. They've fought former brothers whose faces have melted into something between ceramite and meat. And the knowledge that this happened to warriors who were, in every material sense, identical to themselves, same conditioning, same gene seed, same oaths, sits in the back of every loyal Marine's mind like a splinter he can't reach. The chapter-level response to this terror is ritualized containment. Purity seals, sanctified parchment bearing litanies and oaths, are affixed to armor before battle. Chaplains lead liturgies of hate against the enemy before each engagement. The Reclusium, the central shrine within every fortress monastery, houses relics of fallen champions and captured banners specifically to remind living Marines what devotion looks like, and, by implication, what its absence produces. These aren't decorations. They're psychological countermeasures against an enemy that attacks from the inside. But what happens when the enemy is already encoded in your blood? Every Space Marine carries gene seed, genetic material derived from his chapter's founding Primarch, engineered by the Emperor in the 30th millennium. Gene seed is the mechanism that transforms an ordinary human boy into a transhuman Astartes through 19 specialized organ implants, from the secondary heart that keeps him alive after catastrophic cardiac damage to the black carapace that interfaces his nervous system with power armor. It's what makes a Marine a Marine. In several chapters, it's also what threatens to unmake him. The Blood Angels carry the genetic legacy of their Primarch Sanguinius, who died at the hands of Horus during the Siege of Terra. That death left a psychic wound in the Blood Angel's gene seed that has never healed. It manifests as the Black Rage, a condition in which the memories and consciousness of Sanguinius intrude upon a living Marine's mind, overwriting his identity with the dying experiences of a Primarch killed 10 millennia ago. A Blood Angel consumed by the Black Rage no longer recognizes the present. He relives the final hours of Sanguinius, the betrayal, the duel aboard Horus's flagship, the death, as if they're happening now, to him. His brothers become enemies. The battlefield becomes the vengeful spirit's command deck. His perception of reality is fundamentally, irreversibly altered. No demon did this. No sorcerer cast this curse. It's hereditary, written into their DNA. Every Blood Angel knows, from the moment he understands what he is, that the Black Rage might claim him at any time. During battle, during rest, during prayer. The chapter's chaplains watch constantly for early signs, identifying brothers who are slipping and organizing them into death companies, formations of the already lost, given black armor and pointed at the enemy for one final assault. Death companies are, functionally, suicide units, composed of Marines whose minds have already been consumed by a 10,000-year-old psychic scream. Blood Angels don't fear death. They fear waking up one morning and no longer being themselves. Across the galaxy, the Space Wolves carry a parallel curse. Within every Space Wolf's gene seed is the Canis Helix, a genetic sequence drawn from the genome of Primarch Leman Russ that grants the chapter its predatory senses but carries the curse of the wolfin. Marines who succumb transform into savage, malformed lupine mutants, wolfin, creatures that hunger for raw flesh and lose the capacity for rational thought. During the blooding, the brutal recruitment trial unique to the Space Wolves, aspirants drink from the cup of wolfin and are left 1,000 miles from the Fang, the chapter's fortress monastery, racked with pain as their bodies grow and reshape. Some never master the bestial transformation. In the chapter's oldest records, these failed aspirants are described as becoming the most feared monsters on Fenris, creatures that are hunted down by all sane men, hunted by their own culture, cast out from the brotherhood they were being shaped to join. Even Marines who survive the blooding and stabilize the Canis Helix still carry the beast within them for the rest of their lives. Centuries later, in the heat of battle, the curse can reassert itself. The wolf priests, chaplain apothecary hybrids unique to the chapter, spend lifetimes studying the helix, searching for a cure. They've managed to prevent the curse from spreading, but true stabilization has remained out of reach. The Wolf Brothers, the only successor chapter ever created from Space Wolf's gene seed during the Second Founding, were disbanded entirely because the Canis Helix proved too unstable to replicate. Located far from Fenris, the Wolf Brothers fell rapidly into bestial degeneration. Some went renegade rather than face liquidation, eventually becoming Chaos Space Marines in service to the very enemies their parent chapter despised. The heritage that made the Space Wolves powerful also made their genome a weapon pointed inward. A Blood Angel doesn't fear the enemy across the field. He fears the Primarch's dying scream inside his own skull. A Space Wolf doesn't flinch at an orc horde. He flinches at the wolf scratching behind his own eyes. These aren't battlefield fears. They're genetic prophecies. Robute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines and arguably the most rational of the Emperor's sons, once said, "The warrior who acts out of honor can't fail. His duty is honor itself. Even his death, if it's honorable, is a reward and can be no failure, for it has come through duty. Seek honor as you act, therefore, and you will know no fear." Read that carefully. Guilliman doesn't say you will feel no fear. He says that if you act from honor, you will know no fear, because the worst possible outcome isn't death, it's dishonor. And if you act honorably, dishonor becomes impossible. The inverse is the part he doesn't say aloud. If you fail in your duty, if you let your brothers die through incompetence or cowardice, then fear has already won. You are already dead in every way that matters to an Astartes. The Night Lords, a traitor legion that specializes in terror warfare, understood this psychology in blunt, tactical terms. Against baseline humans, their methods are obvious: mutilation, broadcasting screams, striking from darkness. Against Space Marines, they use entirely different techniques. Astartes have no families they remember. Threatening physical pain means nothing to warriors who regenerate wounds that would kill a mortal 10 times over. What works against a Marine, according to Night Lord's doctrine, is targeting his sense of competence and purpose. Make him feel broken. Convince him he has failed his chapter. Undermine his belief that his sacrifice means anything. That, not death, not agony, not the loss of loved ones, is what cracks an Astartes open. During the Horus Heresy, when half the legions turned traitor overnight, loyalist Marines who couldn't reconcile the betrayal with their sense of duty took their own lives. Captain Saul Tarvitz of the Emperor's Children experienced outright terror, not at a demon or Xenos monster, but at the sight of virus bombs being loaded into warheads aimed at his own brothers on Isstvan III. He nearly collapsed. The fear wasn't of the weapons themselves, it was of what their deployment meant, that everything he believed about his legion, his Primarch, and his purpose had been a lie. There is a deeper fear still, one that doesn't announce itself with demons or gene curses or betrayals. It accumulates quietly, over centuries, in the minds of warriors who simply survive too long. Space Marines are functionally immortal. During the Great Crusade, no Astartes had reached a natural biological endpoint. The oldest were barely 250 years old, and there was no evidence aging would ever claim them. In the 41st millennium, Marines with centuries of continuous service are common. Some, sealed within dreadnoughts, have persisted for millennia. An Astartes doesn't age as a human does. He doesn't form a family. He doesn't raise children, build a home, or sit with a loved one watching a sunset. Every human connection available to a baseline person is severed by design during the transformation into a Marine. The boys selected as aspirants are typically chosen before adolescence. Everything they might have become, father, husband, craftsman, citizen, is burned away. What remains is a weapon, an immortal, purpose-built weapon. Weapons are defined by what they're pointed at. Without a target, they're just metal. Dreadnought interment makes this horror physical. When a Marine is too badly wounded to fight but too valuable to let die, his shattered remains are sealed inside a dreadnought, a walking sarcophagus of adamantium and weapons systems. A Space Marine boards a dreadnought once in his life. He exits only when that life is completely and utterly spent. Between battles, many dreadnoughts are placed into extended sleep. Years, decades, sometimes centuries of suspended animation, awakened only when the chapter needs their firepower and experience again. Some chapters treat this as the highest honor, continuation of service beyond mortal injury, wisdom preserved for future generations. But even the communities that celebrate dreadnought interment acknowledge that some Marines dread it. The honor and the horror occupy the same metal shell. On the far side of the mirror stand the Marines who surrendered all their fears and paid in full. Aaron Dembski-Bowden's novel Betrayer contains a passage about Angron, Primarch of the World Eaters, that reads less like backstory and more like a eulogy for everyone who ever fell. He remembered refusing to abandon his brothers and sisters beneath a blue sky at high sun, far from the city of Desha. He remembered the mechanical thunder of absolute betrayal when he was stolen from the death he deserved. Angron didn't choose chaos from weakness. He chose it because everything that gave his life meaning, his comrades, his chosen death, his home, was taken from him by the Emperor. What remained was bitterness. Bitterness is what the Chaos gods feed on. Chaos Space Marines are the end state that loyalists see whenever they close their eyes too long. Traitors swap the terror of corruption for the corruption itself. They abandon the dread of failing their purpose by abandoning purpose entirely. They swear new oaths: death to the false emperor, death to the weakling Imperium of mankind. That mirror in twisted symmetry, the ones they broke. Every loyalist Astartes knows this fate exists. Every chaplain's skull helm is a reminder that it's closer than ceramite is thick. So what do Space Marines actually fear? Not bolter rounds, not Xenos hordes, not death. Death for the Emperor is honor, and honor is the only currency that counts. They fear the warp, an enemy that can't be shot, can't be killed, can't be understood, and attacks the part of you that armor doesn't cover. They fear corruption, the slow slide into becoming the thing they swore to destroy, beginning with a single compromised thought. They fear their own blood, gene curses that turn blood angels into vessels for a dead Primarch's agony, and space wolves into beasts their own chapter hunts. They fear failure, not losing a battle, but losing their honor, their brother's trust, their right to call themselves servants of the Emperor. And they fear survival, living so long that humanity becomes an abstraction, sealed inside metal or centuries, estranged from the species they exist to protect. Underneath the conditioning, the hypno-indoctrination, the 19 implanted organs, and the 10,000 years of doctrine, Space Marines fear that the soul they shaped, the weapon they forged, the brother they trusted, could become something that turns on them in the dark. And they fear it because they know, in the deepest, most human part of themselves, that the distance between loyalist and traitor is thinner than the parchment on a purity seal. The Emperor said they shall know no fear, but fear might be the last human thing left inside them, and it might be the only thing keeping them from becoming something worse. Subscribe for more Warhammer 40,000 lore.